Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Sunday everybody. Today's episode is an extra episode because there has been so much to cover from this week. Let's begin. This week, China-born Australian citizen Yang Hengjun was sentenced by a PRC court to death with 2-year reprieve for espionage. Yang, an academic, has been in custody for 5 years and is only now just receiving the sentence. His sentence came on the same day that a women's rights activist, Li Xiaochu, was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months by a court in Shandong for, quote, inciting subversion of state power, end quote. Associate Professor Chong Yifeng, Yang's PhD supervisor in Australia, called his former student's sentence an, quote, outrageous political persecution, end quote, adding, quote, Dr. Yang did not commit any crime of espionage. He has been punished by the Chinese government for his criticism of human rights abuses in China and his advocacy for universal values such as human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, end quote. Yang was charged with revealing state secrets to Taiwanese intelligence officials in 1994. Veteran China analyst Bill Bishop expressed on the move, quote, the sentence is shocking and will cause problems for the recent PRC Australia rapprochement. Yang has reportedly been in failing health, so unless he soon receives medical parole, he may die in prison, end quote. The Australian Minister for Foreign Affairs, in an official statement, expressed that the Australian government will be communicating its response in the strongest terms. Quote, we have consistently called for basic standards of justice, procedural fairness and humane treatment for Dr. Yang, in accordance with international norms and China's legal obligations. All Australians want to see Dr. Yang reunited with his family. We will not relent in our advocacy, end quote. Australia-based Sydney Morning Herald, in a piece this week, argues that, quote, Australia lost its fear of the Chinese Communist Party in the last few years. Now Beijing is setting out to recondition us to be afraid once more, end quote. The piece said that 3 months ago, quote, it was a deliberately dangerous naval maneuver against the crew of the HMAS Toowoomba in international waters. Beijing pretended nothing had happened. Now it's an outlandishly harsh punishment of an Australian citizen, a suspended death penalty for a man in fragile health with 2 young sons in Australia. Beijing pretends it's purely an independent judicial matter at arm's length from the government, end quote. Chinese state media pushed several articles on the case, making the same key points: that Yang enjoyed all of his rights during the process, that Australian media is hyping up the case, and that the Australian government shouldn't interfere in Chinese internal affairs. Next up, we have more foreign policy developments to cover. Yesterday was US-China. Today we quickly cover an update related to Russia-China relations from this week. For the Lunar New Year celebrations this week, leaders Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin had a phone conversation. Once again, the theme of an alternative order, or bloc, in opposition to the US or Western-led liberal order was prevalent. According to Russian state media, quote, both sides expressed their mutual rejection of the US course aimed at interfering in the internal affairs of other states. Our countries also do not accept political and military pressure from the United States, end quote. According to the PRC readout, quote, Xi Jinping emphasized that both sides should closely coordinate strategies to defend their respective national sovereignty, security, and development interests, and resolutely oppose external forces interfering in our affairs. Both sides should cultivate new dynamics in bilateral cooperation, maintain the stability of industrial and supply chains, jointly organize the China-Russia Year of Culture. China wishes to strengthen international multilateral cooperation with Russia, practice true multilateralism, advocate for an equal and orderly world multipolarity, and inclusive economic globalization, push the global governance system towards a more just and reasonable direction, and make a positive contribution to the effort of building a community with a shared future for mankind, end quote. Next up, and finally for today, we move on to Beijing's management of its currency. If you're enjoying today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking, sharing, and subscribing are all helps for the channel. And for anyone who can go that extra mile and help me keep China Update financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is a lot of work, but all your support are all incredible sources of motivation. So thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. And finally for today, this week, Brad Sister of the Council on Foreign Relations published a great piece on how he believes, based on a robust analysis of the data, the People's Bank of China has been using state banks to help manage the RMB. We end by examining some of his report called China's New Currency Playbook, which we're now quoting selected excerpts from directly. For a period of time in the fall, the People's Bank of China's central parity rate, or fix, the midpoint of the trading band of China's yuan, didn't change. The fix was fixed. That had the effect of blocking the yuan from depreciating further, as the yuan is limited to a range of plus or minus 2% around the fix. Usually, a band is maintained by the central bank, which buys or sells foreign exchange as needed to keep the currency's market price within said band. But that doesn't seem to be what China did. The foreign currency balance sheet of the People's Bank of China was totally flat for most of 2023. Hence, the People's Bank of China's assertions that it is mostly out of the currency market. There were adjustments to banks' required reserve ratio that freed up a bit of foreign exchange held in the bank's reserves. But the People's Bank of China doesn't seem to have used any of its own funds to keep the yuan inside the weak edge of the band from August through October. The bottom line is that it is eminently possible for the state banks to have actively intervened in the market to support the yuan and maintain the bank without any apparent change in the foreign asset position of the state banks, let alone the People's Bank of China. And it seems that China's state enterprises have foreign exchange liquidity buffers on their balance sheets, not those of the People's Bank of China or the state, which also can be used for backdoor exchange rate management. Chinese activities in the market have been designed to support the yuan. Pushing the yuan up and trying to resist outflow pressure doesn't give China an artificial competitive advantage. Rather, the contrary. China hasn't allowed the market to push the yuan down. But the broader issue remains. China's tools for foreign exchange management are more advanced than the tools the rest of the world uses to analyze China's rather opaque intervention. To put it a bit more vividly, in the arms race between the tactics used for stealth intervention and the radar systems needed to detect it, China's stealth technology currently has an edge. That needs to change. Here ends the direct quote and today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Sunday, and I'll see you all tomorrow.